Hi, so welcome back. So now we're going to do lesson 2 in unit 4. This is going to be solving multi-step equations. Basically, we're taking lesson 1 and we're going to make it a little bit more difficult for solving for that variable. So the first step that we're going to do, if it's there, is that we're going to break brackets. This means that we're going to distribute whatever in front and multiply it throughout. After breaking the brackets, if we see that we're dealing with a fraction, we're going to cross multiply or find the lowest common denominator to get rid of that fraction. We don't like fractions, so we don't want to use them. Then essentially we're going to bring the variables to one side like we've been doing, and the constants or just numbers to the other side. It doesn't really matter left or right. We've been bringing the letters to the left and the numbers to the right. And then we're going to simplify. Simplify means collecting any of those like terms. So we've put all the letters together and all the numbers. So now we can add them all together. Then we're going to isolate for that variable by performing opposite operations. So either multiplying or dividing to solve for that variable. So right now I'll give you an example of a straightforward gathering and performing operations, or gathering like terms and performing operations. So if we look at this first example, 6x plus 5 equals 4x minus 7. Imagine that there's that wall. And then we'll go through and we'll put the letters or the variables on the left-hand side. And we'll put the numbers on the right-hand side, which are the constants. I don't have any brackets to break, and I don't have any fractions to deal with. So I'm just going to start moving things, the terms over to the appropriate side. So first off, I've got this 6x, which we'll call that it's a variable. It has a coefficient with a letter, so we're going to call that the letters, and we'll put that on the left side, so it's already on the left. So its sign doesn't change. It's positive 6x, and it stays as positive 6x. The 5 is a number, so we're going to move that over to the number side, and when we do that, it becomes a negative 5. Our 4x, we're going to move that over to the letter side, so that becomes a negative 4x. And then our negative 7 is already on the number side, so it stays as a negative 7. So really what we did there is we put all the like terms together by switching their signs if they cross the equal sign. The next thing that we're going to do, so really that was step 4 from the steps listed above. Step number 5 is to simplify. So we'll simplify by collecting the like terms on each side. So 6x minus 4x is 2x. And then negative 5 minus 7 is negative 12. So right now we finished step 5. We're going to do step 6, which is to isolate for that variable, get it by itself. So right now we're looking at 2 multiplied by x equals negative 12. Instead of multiplying by x, we'll divide both sides by 2. And we'll solve for the missing variable, which is negative 12 divided by 2, which is negative 6. Now remember from lesson 1, where we were able to perform a check. The check meaning that the left side and right side were equal. If we wanted to, we could still perform a check in this situation. It's just going to take a little bit more work. So I'll show you what that means. So right now we're going to check our solution by writing out the left side and the right side and making sure that they're both the same values. So on my left side, I've got 6x plus 5. And on my right side, I have 4x minus 7. So now we'll replace x with our variable. So 6 multiplied by negative 6 plus 5. 4 multiplied by negative 6 minus 7 on the right side. Now we'll use BEDMAS to solve, or again, type it into your calculator to solve for your solution. So 6 multiplied by negative 6 is negative 36 plus 5. Then 4 times negative 6 is negative 24 minus 7. Negative 36 plus 5 is negative 31. And negative 24 minus 7 is negative 31. So the left side and right side are equal. This means that our correct value for x is negative 6. Now I want you to try these two examples listed below. You're going to try them on your own. You don't need to have it printed off. You use a blank sheet of paper if you need to. And you'll try to solve for y and for x in A and B. And then you'll check your solution on the lesson package that's labeled filled in. So that's our basic understanding of how to solve for these multi-step equations. Now we're just going to start adding in brackets, or we'll add in fractions to expand on this knowledge. So for example number 2, we're going to solve for the equation for x, but first we're going to have to break those brackets. So what that means, if I look at the equation that I've been given, I've got 3 bracket x minus 1 plus 1 equals 5 bracket x minus 2 bracket. So those brackets are like barriers to me in math. I can't really reach the stuff on the inside of those brackets without first breaking them, which means multiplying or distributing the coefficient or the value, the constant that's in front. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to multiply throughout to break those brackets. Remember, with our left side, this positive 1 is outside of the bracket. It doesn't get multiplied by that 3. The most common mistake that students make here is that they add instead of multiply. So be careful. So 3 multiplied by x is 3x. 3 multiplied by negative 1 is negative 3. The positive 1 remains and nothing's happened to it. Then we'll distribute for the right side. 5 times x is 5x. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. Now we have something that looks like our previous example that we worked on from our first part, where we've got letters and numbers and on either side, and ultimately we're going to have to group them together into like terms to be able to solve. So now that we've broken the brackets, we can start moving our letters and numbers over to their appropriate side. So 3x is a letter, and we'll keep that on the left side. Negative 3 is a number. We'll bring that over to the right side, and that'll become positive. The 1 is also a number. We'll bring that over. That'll become negative 1. The 5x, we need to bring it to the left side. That'll become negative 5x. The negative 10 is a number, which is already on the right side, so it's going to stay as negative 10. Then we'll simplify. 3x minus 5x is negative 2x. 3 minus 1 minus 10 is negative 8. Then we'll undo the last operation by, instead of multiplying by negative 2, we'll divide by negative 2. Negative 8 divided by negative 2 is positive 4. Again, we can check our solution by substituting a 4 into all of my x values and then solving to make sure that the left and right side are both equal. Now I want you to try A and B by distributing to solve for the next examples. Again, go into the lesson afterwards, the filled in lesson, to check your solutions. The next example is going to involve fractions and creating a lowest common denominator. So what I like to do to create a lowest common denominator is to multiply all of my denominators together and then divide to cancel, which is going to create some distribution. So it's just adding another step before we distribute, before we simplify, and then solve. So what I mean by this, let's look at this first example here. We have 5a minus 2 divided by 3 is equal to 1. Remember, that 1 is also over an imaginary number to make it into a fraction. It's over a 1 right now. So I'm going to, my first step in creating my lowest common denominator is to multiply the denominators. So 3 multiplied by 1 is 3. I'm going to say that I'm going to apply a 3 to all the terms inside of my equation. So right now, I'll apply a 3. I'll multiply a 3 to each of my terms found in my equation. Now when I multiply, before I multiply, I'm going to create that lowest common denominator by dividing the numerator and denominators. So 3 divided by 3 is 1, which ends up really being cross multiplication. But this doesn't always work because we'll have more than 2 terms eventually. So 1, and then in my bracket is 5a minus 2 is equal to 3 divided by 1, which is 3, and in my bracket 1. Now, this is what I'm talking about. We had our fractions, we multiplied, we consumed that that denominator, and now we're left with distribution. So 1 times 5a, 1 times negative 2, 3 times 1. So we're going to end up with 5a minus 2 is equal to 3. Now we've reached the stage where we've created or gotten rid of that distribution, and now we're going to move on to the left and right side collecting like terms. 5a is a letter, will stay on the left. Negative 2 is a number, which will move over, and now it's a positive 2. That positive 3 remains on the right side. We'll collect those, or we'll simplify the like terms. So we've got 5a is equal to 5. Instead of multiplying by 5, we'll divide. And a is equal to 1. Now we're going to use this same process of finding this lowest common denominator by multiplying the denominators, consuming them, so getting rid of the fraction, then distributing and solving in our next example. But now we don't have 2 terms anymore. We've got 3. The same rules apply. So I know that that 3 is over a 1, and we're going to take all the denominators and multiply them together. So 8 times 3 times 1 ends up being 8 times 3 times 1 ends up being 24. We're going to apply that 24 into the numerator. And then we're going to turn it into distribution by reducing our fraction. So 24 divided by 8. 24 divided by 8 gets rid of our fraction, and it becomes 3 in front of my x plus 3. Take the sign, plus 24 divided by 3, which is 8, in front of x plus 1. And then 24 divided by 1, 24 times 3. So now we'll distribute, we'll collect any like terms, and then we'll solve. 3 times x is 3x, 3 times 3 is 9, 8 times x is 8x, 8 times 1 is 8, 24 times 3 is 72. We'll start moving over the letters and numbers. 3x stays. 9 moves over. 8x stays. 8 moves over. 72 stays. We'll simplify. 3 plus 8 is 11x. Negative 9 minus 8 plus 72 is 55. We'll divide, and our solution for x is 5. So right now we're going to practice. I've given you many different examples below on this worksheet, plus you'll follow along in the homework that's listed on Google Classroom. Take care.